driving? How is that crooked picture problem?
Till down on the left. Seems good.
Okay, pin that. Oh, we still have it.
Oh, let's see. Pinned.
Awesome. Who's running the slides?
Forces.
Awesome. Cool. Well, thanks so much for everyone showing up and being understanding with the technical difficulties. I think we're going to first introduce ourselves real quick, and then we're going to dive into the presentation. So, if sure, would you like to kick it off? Yeah.
So my name is Adrian. I started the ExoKit project and more recently the Webaverse project. I've been doing XR stuff for the last, I want to say, between 5 and 7 years. Innovating stuff with VR, AR, Magic Leap, reality layers. I wrote my own browser. I wrote some avatar inverse kinematic systems. I wrote some game engines. I've done a lot of stuff. And some of that stuff I'd like to share with you today.
Yeah, I'm Jared Cheshire. I'm CTO at Pluto VR. Pluto is a communications platform that allows you to be able to communicate as if you're in person. And our purpose is to help humanity transcend physical location. A lot of the experiments we did early days led to a lot of multi-app behavior. I have a significant interest in like bringing about like multiple applications running simultaneously in AR and VR type behavior, and this is something that's very relevant to that. And also a big fan of open platforms.
Cool. My name's Forrest Gibson. Also co-founder of Pluto VR, the director of labs there, and we've been doing VR for about 7 years and been diving into this stuff for quite a while. And so we're really excited to share with you some of the lessons we've learned and some of the stuff that we're using on a daily basis that resembles how we see the future of the web really evolving.
Awesome. So I can kind of like get this started with the title of this talk is basically an intro to WebXR Next, and we're going to do some live demos. But before we get into what WebXR Next is, I'd like to talk about what WebXR is, because a lot of people still don't know that the browser that you're all using to connect to Mozilla Hubs can do XR. It can do graphics, and it can produce images in your headset. It can do input tracking. So it's pretty much a low-level technology for interfacing with all the different devices that people use for AR and VR, whether that's phones, whether that's your Oculus Quest, or your Index like I'm using. All of these devices fall under a certain API that you can use on the web so that websites can basically produce XR content in these headsets and these different devices. This flows through a lot of webby ideas. Things like everything runs inside of a virtual machine, it's secure, and you basically go to a certain website origin to get the content that you want and get it securely displayed in your headset, just like we're doing right now. You can run it on any device. Yeah, pretty much Steam VR devices, mobile phones, Oculus, everybody's supporting it these days, and I hear grumblings of even this is going to happen on iOS as well, so fingers crossed. It's still pretty early, and we just recently got link traversal in the Oculus Quest, so it's an exciting time for a lot of features to kind of like be coming online, which kind of leads us into the next point, which is like, why are we even talking about this, and why are we talking about the next version of WebXR? Like, isn't what we have like pretty good? I mean, we're all using it, right? Well, right now, it seems like browsers are turning into operating systems at this point. I checked the Wikipedia article for a web browser, and I was surprised to find out that they're still talking about web pages, and there's barely any discussion of tabs or like graphics or like any of the ways that people actually use web browsers. But it feels like these days, we're basically just booting up our computers, we're loading up Chrome with our 300 tabs, whether that's a bunch of Google applications, whether that's Discord, we have 10 Slacks open at a time, we have several emails, some of us. Like, basically, the browser has become the de facto operating system that runs on the operating system that you're actually using, whether that's Mac OS or Windows or Linux, and everything's kind of going through this virtualized machine. So in that kind of context, where the browser is becoming the operating system, well, that kind of says to me that all the XR that we're doing should probably be a lot more operating system-like as well. We should be able to run multiple things at a time, not just a single kind of screen that you open and you're experiencing a single thing. And now it feels like a lot of business is conducted in cyberspace. I wish we had time to put this in, but there was a really cool thing that happened in VR chat actually for us the other day. Basically, we were doing a business meeting and we figured, like, why not just do it in VR chat, like provide some backdrop to the discussion. And we opened up a VR chat world. One of us became a couch. The others were sitting on the couch. And we just kind of flew through the world and discussed business. And we got a lot done. It was absolutely awesome. Yeah, I'm talking, by the way. So yeah, it feels like the future is becoming like super spatial, and browsers are becoming operating systems, and a lot of questions are still unanswered for us. Like, how do you find applications? How do you navigate between applications? How do you run multiple applications at a time? And how do you transact, for example? How do you share things in a very meaningful way? How can I pay somebody for speaking at this conference? How can I take tickets for a conference? Things like that. Like, a lot of these questions, I think they will need answers. And what we're going to talk about today is we can move the technology forward into some of these really meaningful use cases in the browser. So to us, what is WebXR next? Well, WebXR being a universal runtime for XR is a huge deal. And that basically means that you have this platform that anybody can use to run XR content on any device. And as long as you're writing it in this encapsulated spatial way against this one API, it will work absolutely everywhere, from a desktop device to AR devices to mobile devices. It also kind of feels like WebXR applications are becoming an evolution of the progressive web app space. And that kind of means applications being first-class citizens in the operating system as opposed to just websites. So the typical experience is you open a website in your browser, you load it.
It's coming back.
Yep.
I lost audio. Oh, okay.
Everybody hear me?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
great. So yeah, progressive web apps. Basically, the idea behind progressive web apps is you're no longer opening a website, but you're opening an application. And it feels like most of the applications that we use are already kind of, they already have this flavor. Like when you're opening Slack, you're not necessarily opening a website, you're opening a full application experience. And progressive web apps basically just integrate that more deeply into the operating system, where you have a whole bunch of PWAs running at a time. How do we move that into the spatial space? That's one of the questions that we want to answer with what's next for WebXR. Basically playing into the idea that it's a spatial multitasking operating system. And with that, you get a lot of these really nice webby properties. Things like distributed identity. Like, for example, I have 5 email addresses, I have many Ethereum addresses, and I don't know how many accounts. I don't even want to know the number on all these different platforms, whether that's Slack, Discord, what have you. But there is a lot of power to being able to do that. You can basically assume the identity that you want for whatever context you're trying to use these applications in. For example, I have many different Slacks, and I'm known under different names under these different Slacks. And I have many different Ethereum addresses that I use for different platforms because I don't want people to know like all the things that I own. And that's like a really powerful feature of the web that you probably want to carry over to WebXR next. You want all this stuff to be social, of course. Part of the reason that these applications on the web really work is because you can easily share things, you can drag and drop things. And basically you can move friends associations between these different applications in a really easy way. The traditional way is just a URL, right? And you send somebody a link and they can join you on the next platform. I think entertainment is also super important in a world where it feels like gaming is taking over a lot of these aspects. I think it's really important that the web, or whatever this universal runtime for XR, can also do powerful entertainment, things like Twitch in an XR context. Of course, work is important. I consider this kind of work. And commerce applications. How can people kind of make money? How can people move all of their business dealings into an XR space as well? And more broadly, I think this is what a lot of people kind of getting into this space, this kind of resonates with them. It's like the next iteration of the internet, or like the next generation, where are things moving? And I think that kind of encapsulates all of the stuff that we're talking about here. And to me, I think there will be a universal runtime for XR. There will be something that's secure. It's going to run on all these different devices. And so the question is, what runtime is that going to be? I think there's really only one candidate at this point. It's going to be WebXR. And that's what WebXR Next is.
And I think that's a really good point when we think about the history of the internet, and also when we talk about, you know, what the metaverse is, because a lot of people talk about the metaverse and they talk about what it's going to be like. And really, when you think about the power of the internet wouldn't be what it is today if it was just a single company, right? If there was still just one company that was driving it, right? I mean, imagine a world right now where it was America Online was the only internet. That would be a pretty different world that we'd live in. And that, you know, it's about how all these pieces come together in a way that multiple applications can all run alongside each other and kind of interoperate with each other to create new emergent use cases. Which actually leads us to a little bit of history around even the internet, right? When we think about the history of browser tabs as an example, using this as an analogy here, you know, imagine, you know, we talk about having, you know, dozens or sometimes hundreds of tabs open. I don't know, I always have 30 to 50 tabs open at any time. You know, just imagining if those had to be separate windows. I personally manage my tabs and have different windows with a series of tabs that have different work contexts, and think of those as like, you know, workspaces. Those are different areas that have different contextual information all together. And when tabs were first made, I mean, there's a lot of questions. Well, why would we want tabs? Like, what's wrong with Windows or whatever? But it's this ability to start grouping things together and having them within a shared context that actually starts to become incredibly powerful. And that's where we talk about the concept of XR tabs, which is...
Right, so I can kind of speak to that. One of the reasons that I got into XR was because there was a platform, the Magic Leap, that didn't run XR at the time. The only thing that I knew was, or at least it didn't run WebXR. The only thing that I knew, my gateway drug, was basically going through the web, doing web development, designing sites. I used to work for one of the premier web design tools companies, Webflow. So that was kind of like my gateway drug to getting into XR. I threw up a web browser and I saw that WebVR was a thing, and I could start building applications in all the web technologies that I knew. And so the way that kind of like I got into all of this is the Magic Leap device didn't do WebXR at the time. And I wrote my own browser in order to do that. But once I was able to do that, I quickly ran into the thing of like, well, okay, so I can run one application at a time. I have this isolated browser context. Can I run two at a time? Turns out the answer was yes. And this is a really powerful way of thinking about things, where you can basically open one application in a space, open another application in a space, and have the two interoperate at the same time. And this also quickly evolved into the idea of like, well, since we're already doing this in the browser, we have multiple tabs. Why not just do a version of tabs that works in an XR context? And that's where we got the idea of reality tabs or reality layers or XR tabs. And this feels like pretty much the obvious way that things are going to work. And I'm really glad that these things are slowly becoming standards. Like, for example, the layer specification in WebXR, the navigation specification in WebXR, just all kind of allowing this idea to exist where you have a whole bunch of applications running at a time in the way that the user intended, to be able to basically open anything, anywhere, in any social context, just as we already use our browsers.
And actually, on that point, you know, Jared and I, and Jared, you can jump in here. I'd love that. Is, you know, we had a similar journey, but primarily on the native side originally, which was discovering the idea that we could run multiple applications. And the first moment that we had, what were we doing? We just turned the opacity down, right?
Yeah. So one of the first things you find yourself wanting to do in virtual reality when you're in a one world is be able to interact outside of it. So as experiments, we just started to do different types of compositing to experiment with what it could be like to run multiple applications simultaneously. And this was like during the days of the first generation VR headsets, just as content had started coming online on Steam.
Yeah, and so we kind of have come to similar conclusions, but from a different starting point, but the same conclusions, and that's kind of what led this group working together and kind of exploring these things together. Which was, we knew that spatial applications needed to be able to run alongside each other and work together, and they just started getting closer and closer and interacting more and more together.
So I can speak to some of the projects that we've been working on earlier this year. I created Metachromium, which is basically a fork of the Chromium browser that does AR and VR. It's actually pretty straightforward once you really get the hang of it. But basically, you can open up the browser, you can get a key on metachromium.com. It's a Steam key. Enter that in Steam, and you can get the browser right now. But basically, the way that it works is any WebXR application, you can load it up in Metachromium, and it will run over top of anything that you're running in Steam.
Yeah, so like I can just run that right now. Like I've got Metachromium
Absolutely
running. So what I can do is, if everyone can see what I can see, like here's what Metachromium looks like. It's just a version of Chrome. And so what I can do is I can go to like WebXR examples, and I can go to the WebXR samples page of the Immersive Web Working Group, and I can do things like, run any of the examples here.
Jared, are you able to share your screen in here?
Yeah, I think so. I could do that.
Yeah, that'd be really useful. So yeah, the way that this basically works is we're using an overlay that's a sphere around the user. You can't tell when you're using the browser, but there's this imaginary sphere that's surrounding the user, and we just do a whole bunch of math to get the eye projection correct.
Okay.
So it feels like everything is running inside of a Steam application.
So I've got it set up so you can see
Joe, make that a little bit bigger. Here.
Yeah, so I'm in multiple applications at the same time. This is WebXR. This is, the WebXR content that's running, and I'm in hubs. I mean, I'm in here at the same time. And yeah, this is one of the things that you can be able to do. And this is just WebXR content. It's not a special app in any way. It's just an application that's running simultaneously alongside that I'm running inside of Steam VR, that I'm running inside of hubs, and then I'm running inside of a browser. And then I can exit VR, and yeah.
Yep.
Sweet. Let's go to the next slide here.
So yeah, what are the kinds of things that you could do with a tool like Metachromium? Well, I'm kind of going to get rid of this. So one of the things you could do, this was an idea from the community. What if we could have virtual pets for our loading screens? I mean, when you're playing Half-Life Alyx or you're loading up a Beat Saber, what are you going to do, right? Like, it's kind of boring, especially with long loading times on some people's machines. So why not just have a virtual pet that can run around, or you can pet him, you can take care of him during the loading screen, so you have something to do. This is one of the things that's possible with Metachromium. Basically, it's just a WebXR application that runs over top of anything that's inside of Steam VR.
So one thing that's cool about this too is like this is a packaged application, right? So this is an app that you can actually get if you go to this URL, and it's a package. And what that means is I can load it up in a different way. So before I went and I loaded up a page from the internet, like from the Immersive Web Working Group. So I can actually have this XR package, and I can load it up. And so I've downloaded this earlier. And I can.
We're actually going to get into XR package a bit later in the slides.
Yeah. Okay.
Cool. So yeah, but yeah, this is basically one application. Another thing from the community is you can take all the existing WebXR content that exists right now and load it up into a completely different context. This is a shader blob experiment from one of the 3JS examples. Basically, you can take this blob and you can put it outside your window as you're playing another game.
My dog's running around.
Another really cool experiment. What if you want to change your home space to something that's running WebXR? Michael Hazani made this Boyd's example where basically you can run another WebXR application. You can toggle between the skybox mode and the non-skybox mode. and you can set your home space for Steam VR to this really cool game of life type birds following each other simulation.
And one thing to note that's really cool about in this example, if you look at the lighting of it, when you turn the kind of the night sky or the transparent version on, the lighting on the water changes dramatically. So it's a really cool effect there.
Yep. Another experiment that we ran earlier this year with an artist, kind of a mysterious anonymous artist, was during the virtual market event for in VR chat. You have QR codes that represent the different booths that you have in the virtual market. And so what we did is we used those QR codes to create an augmented reality game on top of the virtual market event where you're running around. If you look at the QR code, you collect the resource. It gets absorbed into you. And if you collect enough resources, you unlock the dark booth. And what you're seeing here is the final kind of visual treat where you get the t-shirt and the avatar for collecting enough QR codes in the world. This was a really awesome event that we were able to put on basically without even having to coordinate with either VR chat or virtual market, and without us even knowing the identity of who's actually making this stuff. So it was a really trippy experience to kind of be able to see art being created and demonstrated live on top of another game. It was like absolutely mind-blowing.
It felt like magical. Like one thing that was really interesting is like I spent a lot of time scanning QR codes in VKit, which made it really cool to like explore the market. I saw, I think, most of it because of wanting to go around and hunt for those QR codes. And then as you use it, it becomes natural. And then at some point, you just see this magical transformation of the world around you. And so it really felt like peeking into the future of like wearable augmented reality, because in VR, you kind of have this wearable augmented reality capability as these things function in the same way that you could imagine that things would work in wearable AR.
And I mean, the thing that's sort of assumed here, but I know that really blew me away in terms of the functionality, which is, I think sometimes when you're in spatial, when you're in VR and you're wearing a headset, you kind of currently lose a lot of the capabilities you have. Like you don't have your smartphone with you at all times. You don't have these compute tools that you carry around with you every day. But being able to have your eyes be a QR code reader is a really powerful tool that I'm really excited for where it will go from here, because now that you're with Metachromium and this technology, any VR application that has a QR code is now suddenly a link. It's something that can provide data. It's something that can provide connection to other applications, and that's that's something that we don't currently have all the tools to have these applications talk to each other. But QR codes are already a way to kind of hack our way towards that future.
Yep, kind of bringing the future towards us. Yeah, Jerry, you want to talk about Sandcastle?
So Sandcastle is a prototype engine for being able to create WebXR apps. So if you check out the GitHub link that's here, you can go and check out Sandcastle. And this is like by far the easiest, like going from 0 to VR experience I've ever had. With a few command line commands, you can go from 0 to WebXR, and then that WebXR app is something you can run alongside other applications. It's based on Three.js. It's available now. You can go to this link here, and then it's being actively supported. So if you have any questions or anything, like definitely check it out, and then let us know where you encounter issues, because this should be something that most everybody should be able to jump in and be able to create something.
Awesome. Actually, are you sure you have the right version of the slides? Because I think I updated this.
Refresh.
I could refresh here.
Yeah, that's better. So loading. There we go. So we kind of touched on this earlier, but like when you're running multiple applications at a time, what does that look like? In the browser tab case, it's pretty obvious. You basically have a whole bunch of tabs at the top and you're switching between them. But in the spatial context sense, what you really don't want to be doing is typing URLs in order to access something. Like the way that humans interact with their world is not that you basically call up your coffee maker just whenever you want coffee, or you don't call up your car whenever you want a car, or you don't call up your clothes whenever you want clothes. What you have is you have a wardrobe of clothes and you pick out the clothes that you want to wear. You basically have these kind of little packages of reality that you're using in just regular reality. We think that this should also exist in the XR case. We want to be able to say there is this thing, it is this application, it's a car, it's my coffee maker, or it is the clothes that I wear. And I want to be able to interact with it as a unit. So we designed this tool called XR Package, which basically, it's based on the Web Bundle Standard / CBOR, which is the concise binary object representation. It's very similar to JSON for the technically inclined. But basically, it's a way to take all of the web stuff that we're using, take a WebXR application, take a model, take a song, or take a piece of text, and convert it into a single file that you can pass between people, you can pass between realities. And we have a runtime that them at a time. What you're seeing here is you have an avatar, which is a package that I'm controlling from desktop. You have the WebXR blob from earlier. You have the dog from earlier. And you have all of that running on top of the Ocarina of Time Kokiri Forest GLTF model. And I decided that I also want people to give me tips for like some of this technology that I'm making. So I made a little tip jar that's using web technologies and Ethereum to basically be able to take little micro payments for like a little thing that I made. And all of this is just composited together using web technologies. This is all running in the browser. You can even see my URL bar up top. And this also runs in XR as well. This isn't actually the XR version. This is the desktop version. But if you design your applications this way, everything just kind of works together. You can drag and drop these files. And there's a lot of other interesting properties that come out of this too. All of this is hosted on IPFS. What that means is these packages can be uploaded to the cloud where anybody else can download them in another application. We're actually going to be showing this later today. And this is also completely tokenizable. If you have a file, that means you can hash it. That means you can upload it to IPFS. You can take that hash, you can put it up on Ethereum. And what that allows you to do is it allows you to literally be able to hand somebody a unique object inside these virtual worlds. It allows you to basically be able to provably hand over things that you've made. And it allows you, more importantly, to be able to sell them. You can have an artist creating something, packaging it up, and then literally selling that unique representation to somebody else for real money. This is all possible today just using regular web technologies.
Cool.
I think actually we're going to be going into a demo now of some of this stuff. Jared, do you want to take point?
Yes. So we're gonna I'm gonna join Hubs again, but I'm gonna join Hubs again from Metachromium. So I'm gonna actually go down into the center here, also. So I'm
Let's
I'm
go
a
into
little
the
bit more
audience.
lined up. Okay. And then in Metachromium, I'm gonna load up Hubs, and Hubs is also a package, an XR package.
Yeah, Jared, do you want to open the stream?
You can't see my video. Okay. Can you Could you see what I see? I got it in Hubs. Okay, sorry. Yes. I'm going to open a panel in Hubs as well so folks can see what I see in Hubs.
Jared's opening it.
My VR view.
Yep, the mixer is
Okay, thanks.
Can you make that bigger?
While we're making that bigger, I'm loading up an object.
Awesome. That works. Perfect.
Nice.
Okay, so now this will be confusing, but I'm running two applications. I'm running two instances of hubs. So you can see I have the sword here. Does everyone see the sword?
And one thing to note right now is, anyone who's in hubs, besides that screen, we don't see a sword, right? He's just holding his hand out like a crazy person.
Oh, cool.
Okay, now I put the sword here. Now can people see the sword in the instance of hubs we're in?
I got it. I got your sword.
Nice.
Here it is. First
Right.
time.
That's awesome.
You guys
I wanna
witnessed a world first.
I want to see.
Hold on, someone's messing with the stream. Can someone pin this?
I got it. There you
Yeah,
go.
somebody pin the sword.
I think
That's important.
Okay.
No, I mean the stream.
So this sword just came from. This came from my computer into the world.
Oh,
gone.
we lost it.
Oh,
Where'd it go?
it went under the floor.
Well, I think we can
I
still
had
talk
it.
through what happened.
Someone dropped
and
it.
we know-
Yeah, so basically I can kind of explain that. So the sword is an XR package. It's a model that we put through our XR package tool. And what that means is you can drop it into the runtime. Another thing that's an XR package is actually this hubs room that we're inside right now. So, sorry, we're losing the stream. Yeah, so another thing that we could do is we can run these two things simultaneously. We can run the hubs room as a package, we can run the sword as a package. And what that means is you can take the sword, you can drag it into the hubs room, and you can transfer it across realities into the reality that we're all in, which is the hubs room. And that's how I was able to pick up the sword from Jared's reality, as you saw inside this hubs room. And it's completely interoperable with regular hubs.
Cool.
So, like one of the things that this allows, we're actually running a hackathon coming up. What we want to do is we want to be able to present the actual applications that we've developed inside the hackathon, inside of a regular hubs room. This is the best way to do it. You can package it up, you can transfer it across the reality, and then during a live presentation, when we're talking about the thing that we made during the hackathon, we want to be able to just pull it out. We want to be able to show people, hey, this is the application I made. By the way, here it is. You can just try it. I'm not going to talk about it. I'm not going to give you screenshots. I'm not going to give you a video. I'm going to give you the actual application. And here's how it works. It's it's kind of mind-blowing stuff once you really think about it.
Totally.
So yeah, I don't know if you wanted to do that again or.
Yeah, I can run it again.
Yeah, can you do it again? Can
Totally.
someone pin the stream?
Yeah, so I'll get my stream going first.
You have the power.
Yeah,
So
no,
I'm
it's here.
streaming
It needs to
again.
get
Do
pinned.
folks have it? Okay, cool.
Jared, you have to pin.
I will pin because I'm also admin. All right, so pinned. All right.
All right.
So what I'm going to do is I'll just talk through what I'm doing. So in Steam, I'm launching Metachromium. Once I've launched Metachromium, I'm going to navigate to the XR package URL. On the URL, I go to the edit mode, and then I load up two XR packages. I'm loading up hubs, and then I will join hubs. This is set up to connect to the same instance that we're here.
And you might actually notice that Jared is going to have two instances of his audio while he's
Yeah.
inside the second hub.
Okay. Now I have the sword. And now I'm connected twice. So I have two instances now. I'm connected two times. I see myself. You can actually see how I'm myself.
You can hear, yeah, I think this is actually Jared over here. And then Jared is also somewhere over here.
Two Jareds. Okay. And so I got to find the sword.
Did you add it?
I may not have added it.
Kingdom for a sword.
Oh, I did. It's here. I gotta
Oh.
get it. I gotta stand up. If only I had a reality camera too, you could see what I'm doing in real life. Okay, and then I put it to transfer it.
I don't, just click it. It looks like it'll work. Wait for it. Here it is. Nobody touch it.
Okay, nobody touch it. And then I'm gonna.
Here we go. Here's the sword. We got it. We transferred the sword across realities.
Hey.
Woo.
That's an awesome sword, by the way. I'm keeping this.
You can sell it to me later.
Okay, so you took a sword from one Hubs instance and transferred it here
Yep.
Well, hold on. It's not that it's
using
just
that kind of
Hubs instance.
UI.
It's not actually transferring across Hubs instances. We packaged it, we loaded it up as well as the Hubs package, and then we moved it across the different packages, across the different worlds. We moved the sword from one world into Hubs, into the same hub that we're all in. Where'd the sword go? Somebody, I think, grabbed it. It's okay if it's gone.
Yeah.
Should the sword have a URL for it to move between the apps?
You package it up. Basically, you use the XR package tool that turns your application into a file. So we did that with two different things. We did that with the sword. We packaged that up. We have the sword package. We did the same thing with Hubs. We took Hubs, we packaged that up, and we have the Hubs package. Then what you do is you load both of those into the runtime. And at that point, you can transfer things between realities. So you can take the sword package, drag it into Hubs, as you saw Jared do, and then you push the button. And that absorbs it into the Hubs reality that we're all in. And that's how you can see it, regardless of whether you're actually, if you had the sword in the first place, it gets transferred over to the new reality.
The XR package is not a local package, it's on the net.
It is a local package. It is a file, essentially.
On my computer.
Yes. You use the XR package tool to take an existing application and wrap it up into a single file. By the way, I think there's going to be time later for questions if we want to go deeper into this, how this all works.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks for that, Jared. I'm glad it worked.
Yeah,
Totally, it worked twice.
World's first full WebXR copy and paste functionality, which is exciting as it is. You know, how many times you copy and paste every day on your computer? It's not a big deal, but when it's happening in this new reality, it's something fundamentally new.
Yep. Another thing, this was just brought up basically this morning. When you can transfer things across realities, you can also transfer their identity with them as well. When you have content addressable storage, you can basically hash the contents of the sword, and you can give it a presence on the Ethereum blockchain. That means you can look at the sword, you can see who owns it, and perhaps only the person who owns it gets the power of the sword.
Yeah, that was my next question. That's
Yes,
great.
yes. So like all of these things are becoming possible. Another thing that's more recently been possible is we can now run Unity applications in WebXR, thanks to the people at Mozilla Mixed Reality. Basically, there's a Unity exporter, which takes a Unity application and creates a WebAssembly WebXR version of that. And one of the members in the community even wrote a plugin that allows you to do that directly to an XR package. So you have your Unity application, you click a drop down in Unity, and you get the package out. You can take that file, you can put it on the blockchain, you can put it on IPFS, or you can do exactly what we did. You can take the package, drag it into a different reality, into a different application, and share it with people live. So one of the things that we want to do actually at one of the next meetups is to be able to literally take a Unity application, load it up into Hubs, and share our Unity applications with the community as we're building them.
That's
Sorry,
super
Forrest, did
exciting.
you have a question?
Well, I was just going to ask. You answered it, which is just like, you know, we can take this scene, this demo scene, shrink it down so it's not giant, probably, so it's a little more reasonable to deal with, and then bring it into some place like this. Do the same exact thing with that we did with the sword.
Absolutely. And I guess another really cool aspect of this is this looks like it's running in Metachromium as well.
Yes.
So you can basically run Unity applications inside of Unity applications. I think Google Earth is a Unity application. So yeah, using this kind of technology. Sorry, was there a question?
Yeah, is there any encryption or wrapper around it without going to Ethereum or a blockchain at this point?
There is no encryption around the package format right now. The way that we put it onto the blockchain is we just literally hash the package, and that is the token on the Ethereum blockchain. Okay. You look it up by the hash. It's content addressable. So yeah, this is, as I mentioned, there is a plugin that's upcoming. Actually, thanks to one of the members of the community, Shaw, he created a plugin that you can literally just load up into Unity and it'll give you a direct export to a package.
That's very powerful.
Yep. Another thing from Shaw is he's working on a Spoke plugin. Basically, this would allow us to take regular hub scenes and directly export them to packages as well, to make some of the stuff that we're working on right here a lot more easier to access, where you can basically take your existing Spoke scene, create a package out of it, link it up to a hubs room, and then be able to transfer objects between the realities. If you want to do a live presentation like we've been doing and basically show applications running inside of hubs and use hubs as the social platform, this is a really easy way to do it. Just a direct integration with a fork of Spoke.
Database, these things would be great.
So, I mean, our minds are kind of like swimming with all the possibilities for like what we can do with all this stuff. And a lot of these ideas really came from the community, which is like, once you have the ability to run any application anywhere, to transfer anything from any reality to another one, this opens up a lot of creative avenues, especially for artists. You can basically do some of the stuff that we're doing, like the future of work, make something live, share it with the audience directly, and in a meaningful way, using something like a blockchain, for example, to transfer ownership, to have patrons for a tip jar, like I demonstrated in one of the earlier screenshots. Basically, new forms of digital art. And some of the artists that we're talking to are really interested in, for example, proofs of digital creation, which means not only do you have a piece of art, but you also have the proof that it was created by somebody, created digitally by a human. So if you can imagine something like in TiltBrush, where part of the data format is the drawing trace that created it, you can replay it backwards and forwards. You can't fake that with an AI, or it's really hard to do so. It's kind of like a human captcha. So it inherently gives the piece of art a lot more value. You can tell that this wasn't copied, this was made by somebody. And if you hash that data, you can even prove that it was made by this specific person because they put it on the blockchain, they stamp their name on it, it has a token identity, and it has a value. It can be traded. Basically, new ways for artists to make money. And also, you can consider the case of patrons. Well, you can have a piece of content that was made, and it can have an attached tip jar. You can know who made this. You can know which token this represents and who is supposed to get that value. And you can, for example, take some coins out of your pocket and give them to the piece of art. Even if the artist isn't there, you think this is really cool, you can just kind of patronize them. You can say, yes, please make more of this stuff. And to me, this is really kind of like the future of work. Like, to be able to create anything, put it out there, and then other people can discover it kind of in this quote unquote metaverse. And to be able to say, yes, please make more of this stuff. Kind of like like the next version of decentralized YouTube. Another use case that people are excited about is like teaching. Basically being able to open up applications during the lesson to basically be able to use a tool for explaining complex geometry concepts on a stage. We don't have this ready yet, but there is one person in the community that's working on this, basically a tool that allows you to draw and explain spatial concepts live inside of hubs. And another like interesting aspect of all of this is like social presence is super important, especially with things like mentorship. Like, you want to be able to feel that the instructor actually cares about you, that they're listening to you, that they understand like the things that you're dealing with. And like just the social presence aspect of classrooms, I think, is like the main reason that people would want to go to class in the first place. And you get that with hubs. Like, I mean, we've already taught each other lessons inside of these virtual worlds. And being able to do that with things like packages and with multitasking just kind of like adds a whole new layer of reality. It makes location basically irrelevant for the cases of teaching. Another one I already mentioned, I think commerce is moving inside of this direction, especially with all the things that have happened earlier this year. Virtual Market was one of the most exciting events that we took part in. it basically allows you to virtually try different things before you buy them. And we're not even talking about things like avatars, things like clothes. We're talking about brands that have direct integrations into some of these virtual worlds. CryptoVoxels is also doing a lot of stuff there. MetaFactory, MetaCartel. Basically, they're integrating different brand experiences inside these virtual worlds where you can see a jacket. You think that's an awesome jacket. I want to try it on. You can try it on in VR. You can buy it right there using whatever virtual currency that virtual world is currently using. And if you standardize all of this stuff, you basically get the ability to buy anything anywhere and to be able to take it anywhere. And to know that as long as the standard exists and the standard is supported, something like the web, you will be able to own that object. It will be able to be displayed in any one of these virtual worlds that support these standards. And another really cool thing is, for example, the booth experience. You can set up virtual booths inside of an expo using technologies like packaging. That basically allows people to set up booths dynamically to sell whatever they're selling, maybe even man the booths and say, here, oh, by the way, here's some cool stuff that I made. It could be art, it could be jackets, could be avatars, or it could have some real world representations, like some of the stuff that people were doing in virtual market. Like Audi had a virtual Audi car that you could drive. And basically, this is like the future of virtual conferences, where you can take your booth, you can deploy it into the world, and you can share the experience live with people. And then when you're done, you can take the booth, pack it up, move it to the next conference. Just absolutely mind-blowing stuff. Another use case is, for example, entertainment. Some of the meta games that we've been playing, like inside a virtual market, you can have a game where you're collecting QR codes, you're collecting resources, and you get something at the end. You can have ticketing. You can basically have a doorman. You can have a virtual bouncer who's taking your tickets and saying, yep, this is a valid ticket. You're allowed at this event. You can rent an app, or you can even rent a person. You can meet somebody in one of these virtual worlds. They could have a thing that's displaying above their head that says, by the way, I am for hire. I am a modeler that makes these kinds of avatars, and you can kind of be your own advertising agency, or like your own billboard. You can display the things that you're making in these virtual worlds, and you can have a tag above you that says hire me. Somebody can click that and say, yes, please make me an avatar. Just absolutely crazy things. And of course, collaboration, the things that you saw here today, where we're all using technology to share and to express ideas and to be able to inspire others in order to work together.
This one in particular like resonates a ton. And there's a lot of aspects of bringing about what you can do today and what we can do in the future, and making those things the same thing. So, you can open a site together in 2D and you can open a space together in 3D. There's also a bridge to that future now with the progressive web app best practices that were mentioned earlier that is a part of this journey that we're all on together.
Yeah, and I mean, a key part of how all these pieces fit together is that, a lot of the ways that these things have been talked about is like, well, which company is going to build the platform that has all the features? Which company is going to have all the tools we need? And when you look at any healthy ecosystem, when you look at a healthy market, it's never just one company that's doing all the things. It is a whole bunch of people. It is a whole bunch of individual contributors and a whole bunch of companies working together to create an entire ecosystem and market. And so even what you just experienced with that, the teleportation, the copy and paste of the sword, you end up having an ability where you can actually have that stuff. You can bring those things in, and Hubs didn't have the make a sword feature, right? It didn't have the feature to model and craft your own, tokenized sword. Like, that's not a thing that exists here. But because this is on the web and because this is part of WebXR, it can. And I think we're seeing that across the board happening more and more. And so I think that's really where, what this starts to look like isn't one company. It's a bunch of companies building a healthy ecosystem.
Absolutely. And I think the key to all of that is supporting these standards. I think a lot of us in the community kind of agree that we are moving to this metaversey future where everything is just intercompatible. And so the question arises, what is going to be that standard? There's really only one. It's the one that we're already using. It's the one that we're using right now. It's the web.
Woo!
So yeah, show us your apps. Like all of this stuff is possible right now. We want to help you. We actually have a Discord. We're all on Twitter. We're all making this stuff. Also, like if you just want to talk to us, just grab us after this event. We'll be glad to explain some of the stuff that we're talking about and how you can get on board all this stuff. Whether you're a Unity developer, you want to make something for hubs, whether you're a modeler, whether you're a really low-level game engine developer, like the time to like make all this stuff is now, because the people who are going to build the future are the ones that aren't waiting for the future. They're the ones that are making it. So yeah, that's our call to action.
Yay.
Thanks, everyone.
Yeah, thank you so much for to attending our talk and dealing with the early technical difficulties of trying to get everyone in here, and we really appreciate everyone's time.
Yeah.
Yeah. If there are any questions that were unanswered, I think we'll be glad to take them.
I actually want to call up Rainwolf put in the chat that I just loved the idea of like, imagine you walk into someone else's house and you see a painting that's beautiful, like, and there's just a coin slot next to it and you can just put money in it and it goes directly to the artist. Like, how crazy is that? That's so amazing. You're like, I love that art. I want to make sure that they can keep doing more and that it can exist with this new system.
Absolutely. Yeah, and like Jin mentioned, like this is coming to virtual world. So I mean, this is already happening. It would be nice if we were all working together on these standards. And so everything just kind of becomes interoperable, becomes compatible. So like Forrest mentioned, or like Rainwolf mentioned, if there's something that's really cool, and there, by the way, the web is full of this stuff. If you dig deep, you can find so many cool things that people have made on WebXR as well. This is just like such a small sample of what's been happening in the last week that we know about. But the web is really deep. And there's so much stuff that I wish I could go to the author and just give them money because I want more of that stuff to exist. Yeah, the VR internet is way better than a VR app store if you really find this stuff. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to bring it up to the surface and to kind of pull the future towards us.
I have a question.
Yep.
So the XR package, like, what is that? Your own thing? Is that part of a standard, or where do you expect this is going to go here in the future?
It is an aspiring standard, but yes, we did create it. The way that it actually works, though, is all we really did was we took the existing web bundle standard, which is a thing that's coming to browsers, by the way, and we added 2 lines of metadata on top of that, which are just basically what type of XR is inside of this package and what's the entry point for actually loading it. We really added 2 lines to a single file, and that is the XR package standard. Other than that, this is just coming to browsers as well. What we do with XR package, though, it allows for the additional ability to load multiple applications at a time. Just because this metadata exists, you can interpret the package and see, oh, what's inside? Oh, this is a model. Or like, what's inside? Oh, this is a virtual dog. Or like, oh, what's inside? This is a sword. So you can use the runtime to be able to transfer that to another package like hubs, for example. But yeah, we actually hope that this becomes a standard. And we are, some of us are actually in the working groups. I have experience in the W3C. Jared is currently in Kronos. So we are actually trying to make all of this stuff real and make it just a true standard, ultimately, so that everybody can kind of benefit.
Cool.
Other questions? Also, feel free to type in the chat as well.
Yeah, I got chat too. I got the Mixer chat as well. So if anybody
great.
on Mixer has any questions, feel free to ask in the chat as well.
I know there were some questions around Ethereum, but really this plays into the whole packaging thing. If you have a package, you can basically look at the data, you can produce a hash out of that, and just a hash is just like a checksum. It's a stamp, I guess. It's the fingerprint of the data. You take that fingerprint, you can put it up on a blockchain, and you permanently own that fingerprint. And with all the software that we're making, this allows for any one of these packages to have a unique identity that's permanently on the blockchain and that can be owned by somebody. You can claim ownership. You can say, I was the first to make this thing. And yeah, kind of plant your flag for like, this is the thing that I made. which unlocks basically all of the rest of the stuff that we were talking about. Like, for example, having a tip jar that's directly integrated. You can look at a thing, and just by looking at it, you can point at it and say, I want to pay this person to make more of this stuff. And then hopefully they see that coming in and they make more of that stuff. Kind of like the future of the economy.
So there's a question. Any advice when planning and creating WebXR experiences in terms of accessibility? How can we make these experiences accessible? So I could take a stab at that one. So because a lot of this is based on web technologies, these efforts are being supported and tackled in the working group. So there's the W3C has a group in which we actually at Pluto hosted an immersive web working group session around how do we make these things accessible. So that's being tackled right now by the working group, and that's something that if you want to participate is open. So if you search for W3 immersive accessibility, you'll find the resources in order to be able to participate there. And they're in a state in which there's requirements gathering now. And because it's all based on web, the best practices that exist around accessibility show up to the table immediately. So you can expect, if you take advantage of progressive web app best practices, the things that people expect and need to use when they're using different types of tools for accessibility, those types of things should continue to progress and work in a progressive sense. And then as they become spatial, those are opportunities to start gathering the requirements for now.
Yep. To speak like a little bit more technically around that, if you just use WebXR, the experience is actually pretty good. And most of the engines that support WebXR, whether that's A-Frame, whether that's Unity, all these other engines, they generally handle the accessibility aspects for you. So things like controller input, dealing with the differences between a Magic Leap, which is a single controller device, between an Index, which is a multi-controller device, or between a phone, which is a zero controller device. Generally, this is handled by the engines, and it works pretty well. Because most of the engines are just following the standards. Sorry, packages need an adjudicator was a thing that I saw. Yeah, I think what's important is to give people the ability, to give artists the ability to basically plant their flag for the actual package that they own, and to kind of like be a self-sovereign adjudicator of what ownership means.
But there'll need to be an interface to track transactions in a sense, because a lot of this can happen invisibly now. Virtual means invisible, so it's not like someone's going to steal your jacket and sell it in another store, and somebody can walk in off the street and see the storefront, say, "Hey, that's my jacket." This is computers talking to computers within 4 years.
Yeah. So the way that this is traditionally handled is just like the way that it's handled in the web browser. You have a piece of software that's kind of filtering out all of these different signals, and it's giving you a consistent view of reality. You basically, if you want adjudication for your packages, that is kind of like the browser's job, and it's the browser's job to interpret the standards and to be able to give you a correct view of reality, to be able to say this jacket is owned by this person, so you can't just go and grab it. Yeah. And the way that we kind of agree on all of this is through the software that we use. And blockchains, I think, are a really successful example of how to do this right. Blockchains are just pieces of software running on computers all across the world. And as long as they're all following the same protocol and everybody kind of loosely agrees on what things mean, you can have meaningful conversations. You can have meaningful interactions. You can put a jacket on the blockchain and you can transfer it just by following standards.
Right. It's the tracking through the blockchain that offers that proof of purchase in a sense.
Precisely. And it's an active area of research, for example, to show this kind of stuff inside of XR. Like, what does it mean to look at a jacket and be able to ascertain who owns it?
I think it's key to find an interface that the consumer can understand.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'd love to chat more if you have ideas. We're all working on this
I've
stuff.
been selling virtual items since 1995 using Cybercoin, PayPal, you name it.
I have a question, because when you handed over the sword, it disappeared, which in some ways is a little concerning. just, if you're talking about the selling of digital objects, can you talk a little bit more about like how you see that workflow happening? Like, do you imagine
Right,
people would have to get out of VR to actually transfer objects, or do you expect this to always to happen purely within VR? And how do you prevent, man in the middle attacks of someone coming in and stealing it, that type of stuff?
Right. So all of this is permanently recorded on the blockchain, and so you can't really lose any sort of item.
I mean, the scenario, I think that the sword like fell through the floor kind of thing. I don't think it's in terms of lost. It
Right.
was lost in terms of our visual, but having done, one of the things that was a demo, like I've authored a 3D asset and then, made it into a package and then sold it to Jared. And then that's all tracked. And so he can't lose it unless he loses access to whatever account or whatever he transferred it to.
Okay.
Right. So practically speaking, these things are bound to your own identity and not necessarily the world that your object inhabits. So if the
This is where
sword falls through,
licenses
if the sword
need to
falls through
come
the
in.
floor, you can still pull it out of your inventory and say, "Oh, I'll just reset it back to my current location." So it actually
So-
can't be lost if you're using these technologies.
Well, things cannot work. So a license needs to be attached to all items, just like in any fair trade transaction.
Yep, that's another active area of research for us. Like you want different ownership models, you want different permission models. Maybe you want the sword to be able to be remixed by other authors, or maybe you want to say, no, this is a super unique thing, and I want to be the only one that owns it.
Well, just to return the item as well. I mean, it arrives,
Exactly.
but the code isn't working with your platform. Either you decide before or after to make that a return policy as the seller, right?
Absolutely.
As in standard real world. So these are things where licenses can be attached, not just the data, not this. It becomes part of the data of the transaction of the package, is what I'm saying. So it's adjusting.
Yep. Contracts on Ethereum support all of these kinds of use cases.
Right.
I'm excited to see what people are going to come up with and which one of these models makes sense, which one of these models we need to tweak a bit more. And yeah.
This is great. It's the first time I've seen this through Open Web Standards, 3 standards in 25 years. Great.
Nice. That's exciting.
I mean, protection for the artists, for the asset, to transact assets, not just platforms.
Right. And I think standards are the one way that we have that we can truly democratize all of this stuff, where we can say there really isn't a
25 years ago with Vermal 1.0.
Sometimes these things take 25 years to percolate. I mean, the Sword of Damocles, what was that, in the 1960s or so?
Yep. Well, things take...
Yeah,
something
Sword of
has to
Damocles
die
was
for
like
something
the
new to
first...
be born. That's
It was
the way
like the first
goes.
VR device, and then people kind of in the 2010s realized that, oh, VR is happening, but actually VR was happening for the last 40 years. So I mean, what's old is new again a lot of the times. So a lot of the times we also try to look back at some of these technologies and the way that decisions were made, because there's a lot of gold and a lot of really good ideas that we can look back on that now start to make sense in the context of XR, in the context of WebXR, in the context of Ethereum. There's so much unexplored space, and sometimes all we have to do is we have to look a decade or two back and see what people were trying back then.
The world of virtual transactions hit its stride in 2006 around Second Life and Linden scripting language. Now, they figured out a lot of that, but they never figured out to turn it into an open standard. People tried with OpenSims and others. The world wasn't there yet. The world had video and Flash to still deal with. The world now is COVID. And the world now is trying to communicate from our little cubicles to other people with spatial reality. So something has died for something new to be born. So the experience of all that adjudication of how to make a fair economy or an unfair economy in virtual goods is there to be looked at. There's, there's blogs of plenty that are still out there and moving into Internet Archive of things that went on for a decade in that world.
Yep, and one of the best things about the WebXR community, I think, is we have people that come from so many different backgrounds. We have Second Lifers who constantly show up in the Discord and explain to us some of the stuff that Second Life was doing, which was absolutely amazing. and a lot of these ideas like are starting to make sense again. Maybe if they didn't make sense in Second Life, they can make sense and be given new life.
No, they
And,
made sense in Second Life. What didn't make sense in Second Life was that they were all under one company, one
exactly,
final
it wasn't
adjudication.
standardized, or
And
there
when that
wasn't
left,
or there wasn't the
everybody
willpower, or
got
there wasn't the critical mass in order to standardize it. Yeah.
Well, again, when there's one king, you don't have an economy. You have the leisure of the king.
Yep. That's definitely something that we want to tackle, an issue where I think this only makes sense if there isn't one entity kind of controlling everything.
That's the only way you can create a fair system, a fair ecosystem. I agree.
Kulala actually had a question. We didn't talk about XXR, but this is actually Kulala's idea. The idea of XXR being that, so you have reality, right, which is the R. You have the XR, which is the something of reality, whether that's virtual reality, augmented reality, mixed reality. And then you have the other abstraction layer that you can put on top of that, which is the XXR, where you have the X of VR. So you can have like augmented virtual reality, some of the stuff that you were seeing in this presentation. Or maybe it's, yeah, you can fill in this X with like, maybe it's the virtual worlds of AR, or it's the virtual worlds of VR, or it's like the transaction system of VR. So it's like TVR. Kulala, I think, is like one of the most forward-thinking people, kind of like inventing the future for us. And so it really got us thinking with his.
Access to, and if you do want to make an AR app that runs in VR, you want to make an app that behaves in the way that Koala is talking about. Those capabilities are ones that were limited, but now are accessible in ways where you can start to use this stuff now. So definitely check it out.
Yep, and another thing that Kulala mentioned is like, if it's the user's option to be able to fill in these X's for themselves, then this really gives the agency of reality to the user. So you can experience things in VR, you can experience things in AR, you can experience them in mixed reality, MR, which is some blend of the two. And on top of that, you can fill in the other X. Do you want to view your reality as a set of tokens that are interacting? Do you want to view your reality as basically the Matrix? Like, you see a whole bunch of bits flying across the screen and you interpret them, and you can see the redhead inside the code. Or like, maybe you want to interpret your reality as a consensus, like the same kind of consensus that we're experiencing reality through, which is just like hubs. There's a standard way of rendering it.
What about Hardy Har Har?
Absolutely. So yeah, if you're interested in talking about this stuff, we constantly discuss it on the Discord, and it's always like amazing. I'm always learning from both people with past experience with things like Second Life, with these other virtual worlds, or with tangential projects like Cryptovoxels, Neos VR, VR Chat, or people who are just like super forward thinking, like thinking about ideas like XXR and how do you fill in these X's. We'd love to hear about it. And we'd love to build some of it to our capability.
What are the complexity limitations of imported 3D objects right now, like the space that we're in? What are those? How are those dependent on, performance dependent?
That's kind of a separate issue. Most game engines, the way that they handle it is they have just multiple levels of detail. We actually do have in Webland different ways of reinterpreting objects, decimating them, kind of lowering the levels of detail for things that are further away. Still lots of active areas of research there, though. If you saw the Unreal Engine 5 demo not too long ago for running on the PlayStation 5, they have their own ideas of how you can basically do level of detail in really massive worlds. My hope is like all of this stuff is just in open source code that people can use and pick and choose.
But they
the
all
different
have to be
techniques.
reduced to polygons.
Yep, ultimately.
So no point cloud rendering, any native, anything like that.
There are point cloud formats. The way that we actually run our technology, especially with WebXR, is it's not necessarily triangle based. The only thing that WebXR kind of assumes is you have pixels rendering to a screen. So if you have an engine that renders pixels, it renders on a screen, it actually makes sense in WebXR. And there's a whole bunch of people that are experimenting with really cool things there as well. Dreams is, by the way, an excellent take on this idea. It's not WebXR, it's running on the PlayStation, but it's really cool. Yeah, voxel WebXR. There's a lot of cool people working on that as well. Any other questions?
Sweet. Well, thank you so.
Pretty well. Have you load tested this? Maximum number of participants?
Jared, do you want to?
So right now we're in an instance of hubs that's deployed on AWS, and we set the room capacity to be at 100. I think it was capped at some point that it didn't go above that. Ooh, 44.
Yeah, I saw 44.
Okay. Yeah. So we don't know what the capacity is of this hubs instance. The best practices, according to the hubs cloud documentation, we set up an instance, an EC2 instance that was set up for 100, but we encountered issues where we weren't able to get people to join because it said the room was full. So we don't know what the upper threshold is of running hubs, but
there's actually a really interesting idea that we had there. We didn't end up trying it for this presentation, but because we can package hubs and we can run multiple applications at a time, the way we could have done it is we could have had 2 hubs rooms side by side. We can put one over here, we can put one over there, and each one can have 100 people. And if one of the rooms is too full, just like in reality, you can kind of move between them and move to the other hubs room.
Yeah, and
that's totally doable. We just didn't try it for this presentation.
And that's exactly, I mean, applications, social applications like AltSpace do that kind of sharding for large events where they take the whole event and they shard it into multiple small pieces. And the thing that's exciting about this is that we could be doing that in a future forward web way, where the platform doesn't even necessarily know we're doing that, versus a platform feature.
I would even say that this is actually how reality works, and it's one of the things that we might want to mimic, where there is an actual physical concept of a room in space, and you have multiple rooms, and you can have people just literally moving through them.
Yeah.
And bouncers too.
Yeah, and bouncers. That's another thing. We get asked a lot about like how to put on like effective presentations. I think a lot of people underestimate the need for somebody like a bouncer, a master of ceremonies, for having like actual security at events. Once you get to a certain size, like things just start to fall apart unless you have a human element that's kind of moderating the discussion, that's moderating the tone of the room, that's moderating fixing technologies. So like literally the concept of a bouncer in one of these virtual rooms does make a lot of sense to me.
Or at least a snotty maitre d' with a guest list that you're not on.
FOMO. What'll really get you is like if the FOMO is tied to something on the Ethereum blockchain. So literally like the way that you get into the room is you have a ticket that you pull out of your pocket and you give it to the bouncer. And if you don't have a ticket, sorry. Or if you're wearing the wrong kind of hat, no entry.
Or you're a friend of somebody important.
Yep. VR business cards is another idea that some of the community is experimenting with, where basically you can have a provable identity. You have your own avatar and you have a business card that references your avatar, kind of like Hero Protagonist did in Snow Crash, in the original incarnation of the metaverse. You can just have a business card that says who you are, here's what I do, here's how to contact me, and maybe even a way to literally open up a video feed to call this person, or to give them money, or yeah, there's so many different ways that we can take this technology.
You hack your way in with a sword of Damocles.
Cool. Well, thank you all so much for coming out to the event and for the great questions and experiencing history here of kind of the first WebXR copy and paste between realities.
Thank you.
I'm so glad that worked.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. If you want, I'm going to be in the Discord. If you want to post that link again, somebody who has it, because I'm in VR right now.
Thanks, everybody. That was amazing.
Thanks,
Yep.
Kent.
Thanks, Kent.
See ya.